I know so much about you, and I'm sure all the listeners as well, are aware of who you are. I see you as a living, breathing artist, icon, innovator, absolutely amazing, um, just everything. And, your brand, Face Lace, and everything like that. But what I want to share really and to find out more of is, not just your inspiration, but just talk us through, like, I know you say your fascination with faces. Everything that you do always has multitude of layers of design to some sort of extent. So I just want to let people sort of get an insight, why that is, or why you
Yeah.
break things down into such detail.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lan. And I feel exactly the same about you as well. I have had a lifelong absolute fascination with faces, and I sort of call myself the face fanatic. And I think it's perhaps because I was adopted into a family with an adopted brother and adopted sister. And I never had a face around me that looked like me. And so, in a way that made me have a very fluid relationship with faces in general, because my relationship with my own face, it had no anchor. I didn't know what I would look like in the future because I didn't have, my, blood parents or grandparents near me. I didn't have siblings that looked like me. So I had a sort of very open idea of what faces could be. So I always drew faces. I always painted faces. I did portraits of people. I made faces up. And I was just totally fascinated by faces from a very, very, very young age.
Tell me more about like your experience, from school to going to your steps into going into
Yeah.
the design work and then falling into that whole
Yeah.
makeup.
I was little in the 60s and sort of, came into my teenage years in my 70s. And, my mom was actually very glamorous, my adoptive mom. And she had a big makeup drawer. So I used to always go in there and play around. And yeah, again, just being really fascinated. And the sort of the icons for me, I remember watching Cher all the time because she was kind of like the original chameleon, wasn't she? The original fashion chameleon. And, watching how she transformed every week. I can't remember, was it just the Sonny and Cher show that used to be on TV in Canada on like a Saturday night? And then, when I became aware of fashion magazines, I just absorbed those, from cover to cover and became familiar with some of the models' faces. This was the time of a Jerry Hall emerging. So I'd see her in magazines all the time. The beautiful face, this incredible face. And seeing her with different makeups was really fascinating. I used to draw her face all the time. So of course, well, when you draw, you start with just like the bare features, just almost like lines, and you have to like draw all the shading and everything on. So it's kind of, that was like one of the first ways I kind of learned about makeup. But having said that, I didn't really wear that much makeup until I went to art school. And then I used to wear tons of makeup. And I had the Wade Bandy book. I can't remember what it's called. Is it Designing Your Face or something like that? The original Wade Bandy book. And, he was all about the contour and the shading and everything like that. So I used to practice that on myself. And yeah, I got into makeup in such an easy way compared to now. And at art school, there's a huge fashion photography department. I used to go down and ask the fashion photographers if I could do makeup on their assignments. And they graduated and they just sort of took me with them. So and this was like the very early 80s. So and things are so different now. When I came to London, there was, I think, 3 or 4 agents, and that was it. And I mean, there's good and bad aspects of that. I mean, it was much easier to get in, but no one ever said to me, you should assist somebody for a while or anything like that. There were just so few people that, as far as I was aware, there wasn't people even doing that. People weren't assisting. They were just like grabbing their brushes and doing it. So I had a lot of gaps in my knowledge about product use, and also when I started, there was Max Factor, like Pan Stick, there was Kryolan, there was Fashion Fair, that was what I learned to work with, just because probably somebody said to me at some point, oh, this is where you need to go to buy stuff. So I went like to the pro makeup shops, and that was what they had. So that was what I bought, without really knowing the huge variety. And no one taught me, there wasn't YouTube. So I just kind of played and figured it out myself. So there were a lot of gaps in my knowledge.
I mean, so if there's loads of gaps in your knowledge, so how did you actually get into getting a job? Like what was your...
Well, I think because I could draw and paint, I could do really precise lines and I could do blending, but I didn't really know about skin, but I could do a good makeup that looked polished just because of my drawing skill. And I knew what beautiful blending looked like, from drawing. And I knew, just how to do really sharp lips and really good lines and make things symmetrical. So I had that skill, but I didn't have the product knowledge skill. But I used to just make stuff work, just being determined, Well, I used to, because I came from an illustration background, at the very first shoots I did, I would literally design a background, make some sort of weird cardboard thing that the model would stick around her neck, and it would be like a sort of face in an illustration. And I kept doing stuff like that, where it was basically like an illustration with a real face in it. But I always drew ideas down, always, always, always. And, the editorial market in London, when I came back here after Milan, they were a little unsure about me because I just had these really crazy ideas that were like these illustrations. But the music scene really got me. They understood what I wanted, and it dovetailed really well into the whole new romantic movement. So that was so lucky for me that I just happened to arrive at that time, because it was all about almost like a whole illustrated narrative on someone's face. And I did go around to loads of beauty editors with these sketches of ideas, always sketches of ideas. A whole beauty editorial is like 5 pages I would do, with everything drawn out. And they were like, what are you doing? It's like no one had ever really come to them like that, with a whole idea. And it wasn't really to do with like their normal way of working. But I did get a magazine in Paris that said, okay, do it. And it was a paint by number thing. And so I made this sort of like cloth with all these numbers and all these bits of color. And the hairdresser made like this little pencil out of hair and colored that. And then I did the face as if it was partly done and partly not done. I did the little tiny numbers, like little number 2s and number 1s around the eye to, relate to certain colors that should be put there. And this was an idea that I had taken around to beauty editors in London. And when it came out, it was published and it was in my book, and I went back to them, they said, oh, then it was like, oh, can you do that for us? It was like, well, I've already done it, can we try another idea? So I did always have a kind of different approach, and always really want to be pushing and pushing and pushing what like a beauty editorial could be, because I just had so many ideas about interesting ways to show the process of makeup, but not in the normal way. And I just wanted it to be more fun for people.
When I think about your career, like spanning 4 decades, I mean, obviously there must have been some sacrifices, Phyllis.
Yeah.
Is there anything, tell me some of the main ones that maybe people might relate to or may come across if they're going to, envision themselves in this career, any sort of advice there, or things that you learned maybe that could be useful for someone else?
Well, I almost think that, in my first sort of surge in my career in the 80s, I was doing like quite high profile stuff when I was like 24, 25. And I think emotionally I wasn't ready for it, because I'd never assisted, because I was in a country where I didn't know people really. I had no family around me. So I was quite sort of emotionally vulnerable. but in this, you know, in these quite high powered situations, working with top celebrities and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that that was, you know, I probably wasn't ready emotionally for that. You know, my hands were ready and my skill was ready, but like my head and my heart weren't ready. And, you know, I think I can remember now, you know, situations where, you know, perhaps I didn't act as well as I should have, just because I got scared, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so that was probably one area that, you know, in hindsight, I probably could have done it better. But then again, you know, the UK and many countries, I think, they love young talent. They love young talent. And so I did feel supported,
Oh, that
you
was
know,
good.
but there, you know, it would have been nice to have people that I could go to and say, listen, I'm finding this really scary or whatever, but there wasn't. So I just had to sort of deal with it myself.
Yeah.